The war had already been lost. At least, that's what the alien commanders thought when they first arrived. Earth was a forgotten corner of the galaxy, untouched, unimportant, a primitive relic of the past. For centuries, the Galactic Coalition had turned a blind eye to humanity, content to let them fight their petty wars, build their primitive technologies, and rot in their obscurity. But now, with the galaxy expanding in every direction, Earth's strategic position became too valuable to ignore. The vote had been cast, the decision made, and Earth was to be enslaved. Yet, even in the darkest hour, there was hope. Captain Lila Harris stood in the belly of the Resistance's flagship, her hands clasped tightly behind her back as she gazed out at the battlefield through a reinforced viewport. The once pristine blue planet they fought for now lay battered and scarred from years of bombardment. But it wasn't over, not yet. Her people would not bow down. Not today. Captain Harris, we're nearing the target, Sergeant Ty's voice crackled over the comms. He was one of the old guard, a veteran of the early battles, his grizzled face a reminder of the cost of this war. The noise of gunfire and explosions was always present in his voice. Lila gave a single nod, her steel-gray eyes never leaving the distant view of the battlefield. Her mind raced, organizing her thoughts, pulling together strategies and contingencies. The Resistance had gained ground recently, small victories in the jungles of Southeast Asia, a daring raid on the Galaxian Coalition's northern command base. But this mission? This was different. This was the most critical blow they could strike, a direct assault on the communications hub of the Galaxian occupation forces. If they could cut off the aliens' communications, they would cripple their operations worldwide. It wouldn't win the war, but it would give humanity something far more valuable, a fighting chance. Ready the teams, Lila ordered, turning toward the operations table, where her commanders were coordinating troop movements. We hit them hard, we hit them fast. No room for mistakes. We are not running from this fight anymore. As the command center buzzed with activity, the weight of their responsibility fell heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just leading a battle, she was leading the survival of the human race. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the violence they would soon unleash. The mission began without warning. Lila's forces dropped from the sky, their stealth shuttles barely making a sound as they descended through the smoky clouds above the enemy installation. Below them, the sprawling compound of the Galaxian communication hub spread out like a mechanical monster, alien ships parked in neat rows, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, automated defense turrets scanning for intruders. The moment they hit the ground, the human soldiers disembarked in swift, practiced motions. There was no time to waste. They moved with purpose, slipping between the shadows, guns raised and eyes scanning every corner for threats. Ty was the first to speak. "Commander, we have the intel we need. The guards have been dealt with. No sign of reinforcements yet." Lila nodded, already tracking the progress of her teams through her wrist comms. She could feel the pulse of the operation beating in her veins, rapid, urgent, relentless. There was no hesitation here. Only victory or failure. Her troops set to work, planting explosive charges on key structures, hacking into alien systems to gain access to communications, and setting up defensive perimeters. The humans, despite their initial technological inferiority, had adapted, learned, and evolved with remarkable speed. Every day, they grew stronger. Suddenly, the hum of alien ships overhead turned to a sharp shriek as a Galaxian scout ship appeared in the sky, its engines roaring as it circled the compound. The moment it locked onto their location, Lila's heart skipped. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the alarm was raised. "We need to move, now!" Lila barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The explosive charges detonated with a thunderous crack, sending shockwaves through the air. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop, time stretched out as the earth shook, debris fell, and blinding light enveloped the compound. The air tasted of metal and fire, and smoke billowed high into the sky. "Get to the command center!" Lila yelled, her voice unwavering, her pulse steady. "Move!" Her soldiers responded immediately, charging forward through the smoke, weapons raised, prepared for whatever might come. The resistance had come too far to turn back. They couldn't afford to fail. Lila sprinted ahead, cutting through the haze, her mind focused only on one thing, the objective. She didn't think about the thousands of lives that had already been lost, the years of hardship, the sacrifices made along the way. It was just the fight. And in this fight, humanity was not going to lose. The last of the Galaxian defenders fell just moments before Lila and her team breached the command center. The doors crashed open with a sharp clang as Lila stepped inside, her weapon trained on the few surviving alien officers who stood frozen behind their control panels. "We know you're the ones coordinating the attacks on Earth. Tell us where the rest of your fleet is," Lila demanded, her voice low and dangerous. The alien officers hesitated, their eyes wide with fear. Lila could see the terror in their gaze. They had never expected this. They had thought humanity would cower, submit to their rule, as so many other species had. One of the aliens, an officer dressed in black, its skin shimmering with bioluminescence, stared at her with a mixture of confusion and dread. You should not have come here. This is not your war to win." Lila didn't flinch. "This is our war. And it's one we plan to finish." With a single, swift motion, she pressed a button on her wrist comm, activating the signal that would sever the alien communication network. The systems inside the command center hummed in protest before shutting down entirely, leaving the hub silent and still. In that moment, Lila felt a strange surge of relief. The enemy's grip had loosened, if only slightly, but it was enough. Humanity had struck back. "We've won this round," Lila said, her voice calm, almost too calm for someone who had just won such a monumental battle. "Now, let's get ready for the next." The alien officer trembled. You don't know what you've done. The Council will retaliate." Lila's gaze hardened. "Let them come. We're ready." As the final alien forces were rounded up and taken into custody, Lila looked out the broken window of the command center, watching the rising sun over the battlefield. The fight for Earth was far from over, but now, humanity had a chance. And they would fight with everything they had. The battle for Earth was just beginning. The moment Lila saw the enemy fleet regrouping, her heart tightened. The communications hub was crippled, but she knew this wasn't the decisive blow. The Galaxian Coalition was a vast empire, a beast with many heads, and cutting off one wouldn't slay it. She had played her part, but the battle had only just begun. Her fingers ran over the smooth surface of the table in the command center. Holographic images of the galaxy swirled before her, planetary systems, enemy positions, and retreating fleets. The last bastion of the Galaxian forces had retreated to their flagship, a monstrosity of sleek metallic surfaces and glowing red eyes. It loomed in the distance, as if daring them to strike. "We've delayed them," Sergeant Ty's voice broke through the tension. "But they're not done yet. The bulk of their fleet is regrouping above the atmosphere. If we don't hit them soon, they'll launch a full counteroffensive." Lila didn't need Ty to tell her that. She had watched the way the enemy reacted, shocked, confused, then angry. They were disoriented now, but not for long. The Galaxians had technology on their side. They had firepower in numbers. Yet, for all their superiority, they still underestimated humanity's will to fight. "We're not waiting," Lila replied, her voice low and purposeful. "Gather the fleet. We strike now, while they're reeling. We hit them hard, right in the heart." The fleet of human ships rumbled into position as the order was given. The small resistance fleet, once a ragtag group of mercenaries and survivors, had evolved. Each ship, from the battered freighters to the sleek warships, had been repurposed, enhanced with alien technology, and coordinated with precision. There was no hesitation now. The humans knew what they were fighting for: freedom. Lila stood at the helm of her flagship, the Indomitable, a hulking vessel that had become a symbol of defiance. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of the engines and the occasional beeping of the systems. Her crew worked with practiced ease, their faces set in determination. Approaching the enemy flagship, one of her officers reported. Lila's gaze hardened as the ship came into view. The Endurance, the Galaxian flagship, was a towering, sinister craft that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was surrounded by a fleet of smaller vessels, but even from this distance, Lila could see the flaw in their formation. They were spread too thin, trying to cover too much space at once. "We hit them fast and don't give them a chance to react," Lila ordered. Her crew moved with deadly efficiency, initiating their assault before the enemy could properly respond. The Indomitable unleashed a barrage of plasma blasts, which rocked the Endurance's shields. The flagship's cannons fired back, sending massive pulses of energy into the black void. The battle had begun. On the surface of Earth, amidst the chaos of war, Lila's second-in-command, Commander Jace Donovan, was leading the ground operations. Their mission was to push through the remaining alien strongholds and secure vital military installations. Jace's team had been making steady progress, infiltrating the alien-controlled cities and liberating the oppressed. But the closer they got to the heart of the galactic invaders' forces, the more entrenched and desperate the Galaxian defenders became. "We're almost there," Jace muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow as he crouched behind a wrecked vehicle, watching the approaching enemy transports. "We just need to hold them off for a little longer." "Commander, we've got incoming," one of his officers yelled. A wave of alien soldiers, clad in advanced exoskeletons and armed with devastating energy rifles, marched down the street, their leader barking orders through their comms. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, didn't falter. They had fought for this moment. They had bled for it. Jace peered around the corner, taking in the battlefield. "Prepare for a last stand," he said grimly. "Give them everything you've got." The first salvo of gunfire echoed through the streets, and the battle erupted. The sound of explosions, the crackling of energy shields, and the whir of alien technology filled the air. But the humans didn't falter. They fought with everything they had, knowing that this was their only chance to take back what was rightfully theirs. Back in space, the Indomitable took another hit, sending a jolt through the ship. Lila steadied herself as the lights flickered, but she refused to let the moment break her. She gripped the armrest tightly, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Endurance was taking damage, but it wasn't enough. "Not yet. We need to push harder," Lila growled, eyes narrowing. "All fighters, prepare for close combat. I want them on the defensive." The Indomitable shot forward, closing the gap between the two fleets. The human ships unleashed their fighters, which darted through the space debris like hornets. They swarmed the Galaxian flagship, firing precision shots at its exposed weak points. But the Galaxians fought back, sending waves of their own advanced fighters into the fray. The battle raged. The two fleets collided in a dance of fire and metal. In the distance, the Earth's atmosphere burned with the glow of battle. The world they fought for, the world that was hanging on by a thread, was at risk once more. "This is our time," Lila said, her voice low. "We either end this now, or we lose everything." Her voice was cold, but there was a fire in her words, a conviction that could not be shaken. She wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. She was fighting for every oppressed world, for every species that had been crushed beneath the boot of the Galaxian Coalition. This wasn't about victory alone. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy. On the surface, the human forces were beginning to feel the pressure. Jace's team was holding strong, but the alien reinforcements kept coming, relentless in their pursuit. Jace was at the front lines, his rifle raised, shouting orders as his team pushed forward. "Keep moving. We're not stopping until the signal comes through." Jace yelled, as another alien soldier fell at his feet. The sound of plasma fire and explosions echoed around them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. Not now. Not when they were so close to victory. The Indomitable hit the Endurance one last time. The energy shields faltered, and the flagship's systems began to fail. Lila's voice rang out through the comms. "This is it. Prepare for the final push. All forces, focus on the flagship." With one final, decisive strike, the Indomitable unleashed everything it had. The Endurance erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves through space and breaking the enemy's resolve. The Galaxian fleet had lost their flagship. The war was far from over, but the Coalition had just suffered a crippling blow. The once unstoppable empire was now on the back foot. And humanity had won a significant victory. Lila stood at the helm, her hands gripping the controls. Her gaze never wavered from the chaos unfolding before her. The enemy was retreating, their ships scattering across the void. But she knew this was just the beginning. The resistance was no longer just a rebellion, it was a force to be reckoned with. And Earth would rise again. But first, they would finish what they started. The final blast shattered the darkness of space. The Endurance, the Galaxian flagship that had terrorized Earth for so long, erupted into a brilliant burst of fire and metal. It was as though the galaxy itself had exhaled a sigh of relief, the enemy's long-standing grip on humanity finally broken. But the explosion was not a victory in itself, it was the beginning of something more. Lila stood motionless on the bridge of the Indomitable, her eyes locked on the wreckage. Her pulse was steady, her breathing calm. She had witnessed countless battles, each more brutal than the last, but this was different. This time, the future of Earth hung in the balance, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The enemy had been dealt a blow they might not recover from. "Status report," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Fleet's pulling back, Captain," Ty replied, his voice strained but filled with relief. "The Galaxian forces are in disarray. They've lost their nerve. It's chaos out there." "Not chaos. Opportunity," Lila said, her voice steady. "We can't waste this. Rally the fleet. Prepare to engage the remaining forces. We're not stopping until this war is over." Her words were a command, not a suggestion. Humanity had been forced to fight with everything it had, and now that the tides had shifted, they would press forward with the same relentless drive. On Earth, the battle was still far from won. In the cities where the alien occupation had once reigned supreme, pockets of resistance were fighting for every inch of ground. The alien forces had retreated in disarray, but the damage had been done. Humanity's cities were still burning, and the alien remnants had fled to their hidden strongholds, regrouping and waiting for their chance to strike back. Chase Donovan stood amidst the rubble of what had once been a thriving metropolis. The streets were filled with the smoke of fires still smoldering, and the air was thick with the scent of destruction. He could hear the faint whine of alien vehicles in the distance, their engines sputtering as they retreated. But they were not defeated yet. "Commander," one of his officers called, her voice filled with urgency. "We've secured the outer perimeter. The remaining alien forces are retreating into the underground bunkers. We need to move fast before they regroup." Chase nodded, his face hardening. "We're not letting them regroup. We're pushing them back, all the way. They're not getting away this time." He could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air. Humanity had come too far to let the invaders slip through their fingers now. This was the final stand, and they would give no quarter. Back in space, Lila's fleet had swept through the remains of the Galaxian forces with brutal precision. Her tactical mind worked through each move, each strike, like pieces on a chessboard. They had the advantage, but Lila knew all too well that the Coalition was not easily defeated. The remnants of their fleet, though damaged, still posed a threat. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the remaining Galaxian commanders," one of her officers announced. "It's encrypted, but we're decoding it now." Lila's brow furrowed. A surrender? Or a final attempt at negotiation? The screen in front of her flickered, and a stern-faced alien appeared, his skin a pale shade of violet, his eyes glowing with a faint, unsettling light. It was High Overlord Zothar. "You have done well, humans," Zothar's voice echoed through the bridge. "You have defeated my forces, shattered my fleet, and now you think you have won. But you are wrong. You cannot defeat the Galaxian Coalition. We are eternal. We will rise again." Lila's gaze never wavered. "Your empire is crumbling, Zothar. The galaxy will no longer tremble beneath your boot. Earth will be free." Zothar's face twisted with frustration. You think your resistance means anything? You are but a speck in the grand design. The Coalition has armies beyond your comprehension, resources you cannot fathom. Your victory is temporary, human. Lila's lips curled into a faint smile, her tone unwavering. Then why are you begging for mercy, Zothar? If your empire is so powerful, why are you pleading for your life? Zothar hesitated for a long moment before his voice softened, almost imperceptibly. You do not understand the cost of your defiance. You do not know what you have unleashed. I know exactly what I've unleashed, Lila replied. Hope. Humanity's strength will never be silenced. Not by you, not by anyone. There was a long silence on the line before Zothar spoke again, his voice laced with a subtle fear. You are making a grave mistake. Your victory will not last. We'll see about that, Lila said, cutting the transmission. She turned to her officers. We have them on the run. Let's finish this. The days following the destruction of the Endurance were a blur of movement and strategy. The Galactic Coalition's forces were scattered, their command structure in disarray. But the remnants of the fleet still posed a threat. Lila's team pressed forward, rallying humanity's forces, pushing through the chaos of war to finish what they had started. On the ground, Jace's forces moved swiftly through the alien-held territory, striking at the heart of the remaining strongholds. With each victory, the human resolve grew stronger. The streets once filled with alien oppression were now echoing with the sounds of freedom. The resistance was no longer fighting to survive, it was fighting to thrive. As the final battles unfolded, the tide of war turned decisively in humanity's favor. Zothar's fleet, once a terrifying force, was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. The remaining alien commanders surrendered, their forces defeated, their empire dismantled. Lila stood at the heart of the war room, watching the final pieces of the galactic empire crumble. Earth had been freed, but the victory was bittersweet. The cost had been high. Thousands of lives had been lost, and the scars of war would remain for generations to come. But as Lila looked out at the horizon, she knew one thing for certain: humanity had won. Not just for Earth, but for every oppressed world, every species that had been crushed under the boot of an empire that thought it was invincible. Her people had proved otherwise. Report, Lila said, her voice steady. The last of the Galaxian forces have surrendered, Ty replied, a rare smile on his face. It's over, Captain. Lila nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. Not over. Just beginning. The battle for Earth was done. But the galaxy was vast, and there were still many worlds to protect, many species to liberate. Humanity had proved that it could stand on its own. And now, it was time to take its place in the stars. As Lila watched the rising sun over Earth, she felt the weight of the future pressing on her shoulders. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Humanity was ready for what came next. And this time, they would be the ones who set the course. The new age had begun. The cold, metallic hum of the Indomitable was now a constant background to the proceedings. Lila stood at the edge of the bridge, gazing out into the deep void of space, the stars twinkling like distant memories. Her fingers traced the cool edge of the railing, the weight of what had just been accomplished sinking in with each passing second. Earth was free, but freedom came at a cost, one that still weighed heavily on her. Captain, Ty's voice broke through her reverie. She turned to face him. His face was set, the lines around his eyes deepened by the stress of the battle. We've received a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're calling for a ceasefire, a negotiation. Lila's lips curled into a grim smile. She had expected this. Zothar had been the figurehead of the coalition, but the real power lay in the council. It was only a matter of time before they tried to salvage their empire, to restore their dominance. But humanity wasn't about to kneel again. Put it through, she ordered. The screen flickered to life, and a calm, collected voice echoed from the other end. A tall, reptilian figure appeared, one of the council leaders. The being's cold, yellow eyes stared into Lila's, and there was a moment of heavy silence before it spoke. Captain Harris, I am Corrine of the Galactic Council. The voice was smooth, diplomatic. We understand that the destruction of the Endurance was a decisive blow, but we urge you to reconsider. Earth's destruction benefits no one, least of all your species. We offer peace. Lila crossed her arms, her expression steely. Peace? After everything you've done? After centuries of oppression, you think you can just sweep this under the rug with a handshake? We do not seek to erase the past, Captain. We wish to avoid further bloodshed, Corrine replied, a hint of tension now in his tone. Humanity's resistance has proven itself formidable, but we have the resources to continue this war indefinitely. You will not win in the long term. And what about your long term, Corrine? Lila shot back, her voice unwavering. How many species have you enslaved to build your empire? How many civilizations have you crushed under your rule? You want peace? Then leave us alone. There was another long pause, and Lila could almost feel the weight of Corrine's frustration through the screen. Your resistance has damaged our fleet beyond repair, Corrine said at last, his voice softer. The Endurance is gone. Zothar is dead. The Council's position is weaker now, and we are not without our own concerns. You have proven your strength, but you do not understand the consequences of your actions. If you do not accept our terms, we will return. And the next time, we will not leave. Lila's eyes narrowed, but she did not respond immediately. There was no more negotiating. Earth had been given a chance to thrive, and she would not surrender it now, not after everything they had sacrificed. If you think we will back down after what we've been through, she said quietly, but with a fierce conviction, you're wrong. The war is over. You've lost. Corrine's expression flickered briefly, but it was gone before she could fully read it. Very well. Your terms will be taken into account, he said, his voice betraying little emotion. But understand this, Captain, this is not the end. It is only the beginning. We will remember your defiance. With that, the transmission ended. The screen flickered to black, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Lila exhaled slowly, trying to steady her thoughts. The offer had been tempting, peace, freedom, an end to the fighting. But how could she accept peace with an empire that still saw humanity as insignificant? How could she trust them? She knew that the real fight had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of diplomatic maneuvers and rebuilding efforts. Earth's cities had begun to show signs of life again, as humanity picked up the pieces. But the scars of war remained, etched into the land and the hearts of every survivor. The alien remnants were still out there, biding their time, regrouping in the shadows. Lila sat in the command center, her fingers hovering over the console. The war had been won, but the peace was fragile. They had secured Earth, yes, but she knew that peace would require more than just victory. It would require vigilance. Ty stepped in, his face grim. Captain, we've intercepted another message. It's from one of the surviving Galaxian commanders. They've made contact with factions outside the Coalition. Lila's heart skipped a beat. Outside the Coalition? Yes, it seems the damage we've done is being felt across the galaxy, Ty continued. The Galaxians are making alliances with other powers. There are talks of unification among their remaining allies. Lila turned her chair toward him, her mind working quickly. The Coalition may have been the strongest, but it wasn't the only force in the galaxy. We've shaken them, but the galaxy is full of predators. We've received word from some of the independent systems, Ty added. They're offering support, Captain. It seems like Earth has become a symbol of resistance. They want to join us. Lila's lips curved into a brief, tired smile. The rebellion had spread. Earth's fight had inspired others, other planets, other species, and they were now rallying to her side. Humanity had sparked something they could not have anticipated, a galactic revolution. Earth was no longer a symbol of weakness, but a beacon of strength. We will have to prepare, Lila said, her voice firm. It's not just the Galaxians we need to worry about now. The galaxy is shifting. The balance of power is in flux, and we must be ready for anything. Ty nodded, stepping closer. What do you want us to do? Get in contact with our allies. We need a unified front. Prepare the fleet for possible engagements. And start sending messages to the independent systems, let them know Earth is standing with them. The weight of leadership pressed on her once more. It wasn't enough to defeat an empire, they needed to rebuild, to stand tall against all who would seek to dominate them. Earth had proven its strength, but that strength needed to be maintained. The galaxy was vast, and their enemies, though weakened, were not gone. Lila stood up, her eyes scanning the holographic map of the galaxy. The universe was still full of unknowns, full of dangers. But for the first time, she felt a spark of hope for the future. As Lila stood at the edge of the bridge again, her eyes locked on the stars ahead, she could almost hear the voices of those who had fought beside her. The fallen, the survivors, the brave men and women who had taken Earth back. She could almost hear their resolve, their refusal to bow. Earth was free, but the fight wasn't over. This is only the beginning, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. And though the universe was vast and full of uncertainty, one thing was clear. Humanity would never be silenced again.